Welcome to Solve at MIT 2023.
Hey, I'm BT Wolf, and this is Thinking for Two. Maybe I'm wrong to behave like I do. Guess I'm not used to thinking for two. But I never lie, though I bent the truth too many times. And there's no excuse, so I pick a fight. I stamp my feet, pretend it's all you. We know that it's me, and you wait it out. It must be hard to love something more, the more that it scars. Baby, let's not compete. No one of us will surely lose and take this little truce. And I try to think for you. Maybe I'll learn and get there with time. See what it's worth to keep you on side. The sound and the fury of too many fights fades in the light of you by my side. So we will keep walking, we will play on. Gave you my word, I try to stay strong. 'Cause I'm not the best at thinking for two, but maybe I'll try with you. Baby, let's not compete. No one of us will surely lose and take this little truce. And I try to think for you, baby. Let's not compete. No one of us will surely lose and take this little truce. And I try to think for you.
Please welcome Hala Hanna, Executive Director, MIT Solve.
Hello. Welcome to Solve at MIT. I'm Hala Hanna, Executive Director of Solve. I've been at Solve since the very early days, but this is my first time as the Executive Director. And thank you. Thank you. And it is May the 4th, so I do feel compelled to make a May the 4th reference. 170 million. That's the number of lives that our 260 plus innovators that we've selected over the past 6 years have reached. And these innovators are not MIT students. Some have actually never been on a college campus. These are folks who saw a problem in their community and decided to do something about it. MIT created the Solve platform, so we source these brilliant innovators and their tech-based solutions and address the urgent problems of our time. And we then help create partnerships to scale this impact. Tech and partnership, together, they really transform the scope and scale at which things can be done. Our mission is a natural offshoot of MIT's mission, which is to bring knowledge to bear on the great challenges of our time. And we've been lucky to work with fantastic MIT colleagues from the MIT community throughout. One very special supporter is, like me, relatively new to her job, but she's an incredibly accomplished and multidisciplinary scientist, a scholar, a teacher. Her reputation is one of as a brilliant administrator, a creative problem solver, and now the 18th president of MIT. So please join me in giving a very warm Solve welcome to President Sally Kornbluth.
Thank you, Hala, for that kind introduction. So, good afternoon, everyone. Such an amazing crowd. And I know that, I'm gonna step up because I'm shorter than I thought. I know that some of you came from thousands of miles away to join us, and some of you are likely visiting MIT for the very first time. Many of you have been at the Institute for years, far longer than I have, and only had to walk from across campus. But wherever you've come from, near or far, welcome to Solve at MIT. So many of you know this is my first time speaking to the Solve community. As Hala indicated, I've only been president. I'm a new president, and in fact, I've only been president for a few months, and my inauguration was just 3 days ago. So I hope you don't mind. I hope you won't mind if I start by saying a few words about how I got here. So last fall, when MIT first reached out to me, I was happily settled at a school that I loved in a role that had lots and lots of interesting challenges. As I said in my inauguration address as well, I was not exactly in the mood to leave. But, you know, MIT is MIT. And when the offer came, I just could not say no. Why is that? Because I knew that if I really wanted to make an impact, there was no better place to be than MIT. So I suspect your reasons for joining Solve are much the same. A powerful desire to make an impact, to improve people's lives, and to help solve very, very tough problems. Now, of course, I'm learning very quickly that the people of MIT love to solve tough problems, and MIT is overflowing with creativity and ingenuity, an incredible concentration of talent and imagination, really united by a drive to make a difference. But, you know, despite all of that, the scale, the complexity, the global nature of the problems we're dealing with are so big that no single institution or industry or country can deal with them all on their own. We need strong partnerships and people who bring unique insights, new expertise, and firsthand experience of the different ways that global challenges can play out in different countries, in different cities, and in different communities. And this is exactly where Solve comes in. Around the world, Solvers teams are taking on a huge range of problems. The 2022 group alone includes teams focused on reducing the damage from climate change, building more sustainable housing, improving access to childcare and elder care, reducing bias in healthcare systems, and figuring out how to increase digital literacy for people in underserved communities. No matter what the problem you've decided to take on, we're grateful to all of you for sharing your innovative solutions and striving to transform your ideas into impact. So I'm told that since its inception in 2016, Solve has received nearly 16,000 solutions in response to its annual challenges. Clearly, the competition to be selected as a Solver team is pretty fierce. So, to all of this year's winners, congratulations on your brilliant and important work. So let's give the winners a round of applause. And now, I leave it to all of you to get solving. So thank you very much, and have a great time.
Thank you so much, President Kornbluth. At the inauguration just 3 days ago, we was really inspired and struck by President Kornbluth's aspiration for MIT to really lead on climate action. And this is something that's going to be very much a red thread through this conversation. It's definitely a red thread through the work that we do. What interesting times we're in, right? Especially for those of us who are immersed in thinking about how technology impacts society, it can feel quite confusing right now. It's like a pendulum, from optimism to pessimism. But then I remind myself that optimism isn't about looking away from the issues, but looking right at them and believing that we can create the solutions and then getting to work. So anytime I need a dose of optimism, I look at the innovators we work with. We've launched 70 challenges to date on topics as wide as pandemic preparedness, anti-racist technology, carbon capture, and we've received over 15,000 applications from nearly every country. What this tells me is how many people out there are busy creating the future that they want. We select the most promising solutions, and then we deploy a support program and a supportive community to help them scale. Together with our supporter organizations, we facilitated over $65 million to date for these innovators. And so if you're a sole supporter in the audience, thank you. And a special thanks to our big supporters, HP, GM, Mortgage Family Foundation, Living Proof, George Kaiser Family Foundation, and there are many more. Now, the heart of our work is our solver teams. These are the innovators that we select annually with our global challenges, which we design in global consultation. The 268 teams that we've selected are majority women-led, and they're mostly focused on underserved communities. And they're the ones who report reaching 170 million lives. The 2022 Solver class is with us today. Please give them a round of applause. Sometimes we get bogged down with definitions. What's innovation? Well, innovation is solving real problems for real people. And it's real. A visually impaired person who learns to read, write, and type in Braille, all on her own, thanks to Solver Sanskriti's literacy device, Annie. An Indigenous student who can go to college because of a scholarship he won, thanks to Solver Brittany's ONSFA app. Or a baby, born overnight, healthy, thanks to the solar-powered suitcases that light up a health facility in rural Uganda. That's Solver Laura's Light Every Birth product. I can go on for another 40, but I won't. And I think you're here today because you're not satisfied with consuming the latest news and being bystanders to global disasters. I think you share our optimism that together there's no challenge that we cannot collectively solve. We have a great program for you, all showcasing technology enhancing our humanity. Are you ready for it? Yes? Yay. I love the enthusiasm, or maybe you're booing me off stage, I don't know. But if you stay till the end, maybe I'll do a Star Wars joke. Our next speaker is an inspiration to Boston and beyond. She embodies perseverance, integrity, grit, all of which are so important if you're a boundary pusher and entrepreneur. So please join me in welcoming ballroom dancer and Boston Marathon bombing survivor, Adrienne Hazlitt.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hala. Thank you, MIT. Hi. I've been asked by MIT to come here today to share a little bit about my story and share some life lessons that I've had to learn and relearn along the way. Hope that you can put them in your pocket for a rainy day when you can use them either personally or professionally. My story starts like anyone else's, from the beginning. I grew up in my parents' independent books and records store right outside of Seattle, Washington, in Microsoft country, before it was Microsoft country, when it had one streetlight. There was a day like that. And when your parents have an independent books and records store, you do not own a television. I know, I say that in a tech room, it's crazy. You don't have a television. And so I remember being about 7 or 8 years old and going over to my aunt and uncle's house, and they had put all of us kids to bed, my 2 older brothers, they're twins, and myself, and they put us to bed, and like anyone did at that age, I thought, well, I don't want to do that, right? Parents in the audience know that your kids never want to go to bed on time, and I snuck back downstairs. And you know when you're in the living room, and I snuck behind this chair, and you know those chairs that are like your grandmother's chairs, and they're made of carpet, and they smell really bad? You know what I'm talking about. You're laughing because you know. And I sneak my bright red hair and my giant Coke bottle glasses against this chair, and I look at a screen for the very first time. Because back then, if you were going to play, you weren't going to look at technology. You were, not inside someone's house. You just were outside until the streetlights came back on. And that moment, I looked at the screen, and I saw Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers dancing. Now, for those youngins in the audience, those are ballroom dancers in an old movie, an old black and white movie called Cheek to Cheek. And Ginger Rogers was doing everything that Fred Astaire did, backwards, better, and in high heels. And I thought, I am smitten. She had on this silk organza gown and these ostrich feathers, and I was in love, and my little jaw hit the floor, and the movie ended, and somehow, some way, I snuck back upstairs. But the next morning at the breakfast table, on cue for a child's attention span, I put my little fists on that breakfast table and I said, I want to be Ginger Rogers when I grow up. My parents were like, well, good thing we didn't have Game of Thrones on. Who knows what that would have done, right? And I was smitten, and I think my parents were very excited to have something for me to do after school that would take up all my energy. So I went into dance classes, and I danced, and after high school, I started talking to my parents about how much I did not want to go to college. Ginger Rogers certainly didn't, right? And I managed to get 1 year out of them, 1 year of trying to go pro before I needed to go to college. And I auditioned for all of these different things, and I thought, no just means not yet, right? I had to learn that lesson. No just means not yet, and I would be in a room and dance in front of everyone, and they would say, too tall, not tall enough, not pretty enough, cute enough, short enough, etc. And finally one day I'm at an audition and I make it, as pro as a ballroom dancer, and I'm dancing and I'm competing, and finally my coach says to me, Adrienne, if you want to be Ginger Rogers, if you want to be the best in the world, you're going to need to move to Boston. And I said, Boston? What's so cool about Boston? No offense. I didn't know at the time. I didn't know how cool all of you were. And he said, the best ballroom dancers are in Boston. And I thought, okay. And I put my VHS tape in a manila envelope, because that's what you did back then, and I mailed it off. Remember those? That's tech for you. Learned something finally, right? And I stuck it out into the mail, and I got a response back a week and a half later, and bags were packed, and I moved to Boston. I didn't know a soul. And I danced, and I finally made it to Vegas. I got semifinals, finals, and I made it to 3rd in the world. And I thought, that's it. Finally, Ginger Rogers. I finally am perfect, whatever the heck that means. And I was so excited, and I decided to take a day off. And when I took that day off, I slept in, and I was so excited, and I called my manager, and I said, I'm going to take a day off. And he said, Adrienne, we don't take days off. Athletes don't take days off. Maybe I would dance for 6 hours instead of 12. And I said, I'm going to take a day off. I just got third in the world. And he said, yeah, but you didn't get first. Same. And I thought, that's ridiculous. Why does he want me to be perfect? And I thought, oh, of course he wants me to be perfect. I've been chasing perfection my whole life. And he said, you may not have a job tomorrow if you don't come back. I took the day off. I took myself out to lunch, and I heard all this commotion one street over. And I thought, gosh, what is that? And I went over there, and I thought, oh, it looks like a parade. There are all these runners running. I turned to this guy, and mind you, I am bronzed, bedazzled, my lashes, my nails, my high heels, everyone else is in kicks. And I look at this guy, and I go, what is this? And he said, it's the Boston Marathon. And I said, no way, it's the Boston Marathon. And boom, a bomb went off behind me. I screamed, I covered my ears, and it was about a block away. And I saw black smoke, and I said, the next one's gonna, and I was on the ground. I couldn't see, I couldn't hear, I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or closed, and all I saw was gray. I felt like a building was on top of me, and when I finally saw that the smoke was clearing, I realized the gray was just smoke, and I smelled that all too familiar smell when you leave your curlers on too long. And I started batting out the fire in my hair, and I looked down, lifted my right leg, giant gash, blood everywhere, and I tried to lift my left leg, and I tried to lift my left leg, and I kept looking, and I realized I was lifting it. It just wasn't there. And I thought two things. Number one, there goes Ginger. And number two, there is no way that my family can make it out here to say goodbye. Why on earth did I chase perfect? And just when I started to get cold, and just when I started to shake, and an off-duty doctor comes and rips off his belt and the belt of the person next to him, Indiana Jones style, and ties 2 tourniquets around my legs to save my life. And in walks, to the area that they carried me, in walks like a doorway, similar to that exit sign over there, 5 of the hottest Boston firemen I've ever seen in my entire life. And I was like, oh, hot damn, yes. And my therapist since has said that maybe we remember things differently in trauma, but I have done speeches for them, and I can guarantee it was like Grey's Anatomy hot. And they wheeled me off. It was great. For the moment. They wheeled me off into Boston Medical Center, and I looked at my Superman surgeon as the lights went on in the surgical room, wide awake, knowing very well what had just happened to me, after being told I needed to call my parents and say goodbye, which I did. He said, Adrienne, I need you to count back from 10. And I said, quote, my foot is over on Boylston Street. I have not made first in the world. My parents are on their way. You need to save me. And he said, count back from 10. I woke up, and it was like slow motion in the hospital bed. I woke up, and there was one long leg, one very short leg. And at the end of those legs, at the end of that bed, stood my Superman surgeon and both of my parents. And I was so glad to see them. I was so happy to see them. And the next few days were a blur, but I remember my mother sneaking Anderson Cooper into my room at the hospital. And as he walks in, I'm like licking my hand like a cat, like, can someone draw back on my one eyebrow that's missing? Like trying to look good. And we get to talking, and he says, Adrienne, do you think you'll ever dance again? And I said, yes, I think I will. I'm gonna at least try. And he says, do you think you can? And if you do, will you teach me? And I was like, hot damn, yes. I will teach you. And then that felt so good to say that goal out loud, right? It feels good to say our goals out loud because then we can be held accountable. It felt so good to say that I then somehow, some way, somewhere, I blame his blue eyes and the medication, that I said, I think one day I'll run the Boston Marathon as a thank you for this Boston Strong movement that I was feeling from everyone in Boston and around the globe, for all of us survivors. And he looks at me and he says, you've spent the entire interview saying that you are not a runner, that you would never get caught dead sweating in public. My dad is in the background, like waving his arms, saying, Adrienne, you forged notes in high school to get out of running the mile. And I thought, I didn't know you knew that. I had never even run across a crosswalk at that point in my life. But it felt so good to say those goals out loud. And a few days later, my Superman surgeon stood at the end of my bed with discharge papers. He's crying, I'm crying. I know it's not a surprise to you to learn that we grew very close. We still are. His daughter is now a ballroom dancer. I know, right? And he's crying and I'm crying, and he says, before you leave, Adrian, before we sign these discharge papers, I need you to make me 3 promises. And I said, okay, I'm kind of busy, like recovering right now, Dr. Kalish, what do you need? And he said, promise number 1, you will not let anyone else take out your stitches. And I said, that's easy. PTSD, incredible trust issues. I promise. And he said, promise number 2, when you dance, not if, you tell me, and I will be there to cheer you on. And I said, I promise. Tears, even heavier now. And he says, promise number 3, Adrian, when you run the Boston Marathon, not if, you tell me, and I will be there to cheer you on. And I said, I promise, with tears streaming down my face. We sign the discharge papers, and I go out into the big, scary world where strangers walk on sidewalks, where you don't know where you are, loud noises, backfiring of cars, fireworks. Why with the fireworks? And suddenly I'm back in his office. I'm getting my stitches out. Promise number 1. Only 4 months later, back in my in a leg and back in my high heels and a dress, thanks to MIT and myself working with the Media Lab, designing the very first dancing leg of its kind. I spent countless hours and hours in the Media Lab helping design it. I stood backstage at a big TED conference. I'm bronzed, bedazzled, lashes, nails, high heels, ostrich feathers, glitz and glamour, and I'm standing next to a tall top hat and tails, and I lose it, and I start sobbing. And he says, Adrian, you're gonna be fine, my partner. Adrian, you're fine. You're gonna remember your steps. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna be perfect. You're gonna be perfect. And I looked him dead in the eye, and I said something I never thought I would say. I don't wanna be perfect. I'm just happy to be here. And the curtain opened, my mascara was everywhere, and I danced. Perfectly imperfect. Promise number 2 to Dr. Superman Kalish, done. I got back to Boston after doing that big TED Talk, and I had people on the street who were holding me accountable, because that's what happens when we say our dreams out loud, who said, Adrian, you danced again. Are you gonna run Boston? And I was like, did you know that's 26.2 miles for a statement necklace and a free banana? Like, that's all you get, and I think you have to pay to go and run that. Do you know how hard that is? And they said, yeah, but you can do it. You said you would. And I was like, yeah, I was highly medicated. Highly medicated. And under the influence of Anderson's eyes. I don't know if I can do that. And I thought, you know what? For the people of Boston and beyond who've been so wonderful to all of us, I'm going to give it a good college try, because I give college that much of a try. And I lace up. I get 1 flat shoe, I think, for the first time in my life, always owning heels, and I go out to do a lap around the block, and I thought, that is hard as hard. I do not think I can do this. I felt like I'd just danced 12 hours after running for 5 minutes, and I was wobbly, and the blade was awkward, but then I kept at it. I kept at it because I knew that there was a terrorist out there that would love it if I just gave up. And I kept at it, and I kept at it, and one day at brunch, maybe 4 or 5 months later, I am with my girlfriends, and I decide to confess. Mind you, I know no runners at this stage in my life, none. People that sweat in public don't know them. And I tell them, and I'm like, I'm running. I'm sweating in public. I'm running, and I'm running. And they're dancers, and they're all glammed up, and they're like, why would you do that? How far are you going? And I said, no one knows it's me. I'm doing it like in the outskirts of a small town. I take an Uber. And they said, well, why would you do that? How far are you going? And they gave me an app to track, and I went home and realized I was running 10 miles. And I thought what anyone would think. I could double that and add 6. No big deal. And so I stood at the start line of the 2016 Boston Marathon, full panic, hadn't trained. And my boyfriend at the time looked at me and he goes, Adrian, this is the biggest life lesson I can share with you. Adrian, what will get you to that finish line is nothing compared to what got you to the start. So often we think of everything we have in front of us instead of thinking all the things we needed to do to get there. I learned to walk. I learned to navigate New England winters when you don't know if it's the crunchy snow underneath you or the soft stuff. You're gonna land on your bum. And I thought, I can do this, I can do this. And I took off, and I ran, and I passed physical therapists that have put this body back together more times than I can count. I passed my Superman surgeon to fulfill promise number 3. I passed FBI agents who held my hand when I faced the monster in the courthouse face to face. I passed nurses and doctors, my family members, and I think the best thing was passing little boys and little girls that I mentor with their prosthetic legs out, holding their pant leg out, being like, yeah, same. Because let me tell you something, we can't be what we can't see. Years later, I fought for a para division in the Boston Marathon because even the Paralympics doesn't think we can do it. We got it. And now tens of thousands of generations will come after me, competing with their name on their bib in a place to be at the #1 marathon in the world. The last lesson that I want to share with you is this. Your life can change in a matter of 3.5 seconds. But it is up to you to make every single second count after, because believe me, they do. Thank you so much for your time.
And now, please welcome Solver Atif Haved, Executive Director, Tarjimly.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I think it was 2015 when I came on this stage performing for MIT Bhangra, so it's exciting to be back. There's no dancing today, I promise, but I hope you enjoy the talk regardless. So it's nice to meet you all. My name is Atif. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Tarjimly, the world's most accessible translator and interpreter service. So as you probably know, the refugee population has exploded to 33 million in just the last few months due to conflict and climate change. But you likely don't know that 44% of them can't communicate with the people trying to help them because of language. Even in the US, over 75% of medical providers, report poor access to interpretation services that are needed by over 60 million refugees, immigrants, and asylum seekers. And that shamefully leads to discriminatory denial of service for so many, but also errors, confusion, and ultimately adverse health outcomes. And I know this really well because I come from a refugee and immigrant family. My grandmother was a refugee who depended on me for years to interpret for her, even as a 10-year-old kid. She's the reason that after I graduated from MIT, I went to volunteer in refugee camps in Greece and Turkey, and I saw women just like her every day struggling just to communicate how much they're struggling. And that's where I also learned that a key challenge for global health is that there simply aren't enough interpreters today to meet the surging demand, in person and remote. And that's further choked by huge prices, low language coverage, and long wait times. And machine translation just isn't good enough yet, especially for the long tail of languages. And so this led my best friend and I, roommates at MIT, to build Tarjimly in 2017, a nonprofit of both engineers and humanitarians from 15 countries with a core belief that it's a human right to be heard and understood. Tarjimly is a mobile app that connects refugees, immigrants, and humanitarians in need with a live interpreter for over 120 languages in under 2 minutes. Tarjimly is now fully HIPAA and safeguarding compliant, facilitates trainings and filtering for medical experience, and supports several indigenous languages. We essentially merged 2 powerful solutions, community and technology. So we enable the world's 3 billion bilinguals to serve as micro-volunteers for the 33 million refugees, and we have 50,000 volunteer interpreters today. We also hire bilingual refugees as professional rare language interpreters. We then train and deploy them efficiently using this AI matching algorithm that we've built, which optimizes for speed, quality, use cases, utilization, and cost. So put simply, we get you the right interpreter at the right time for the right situation. And so all of this unlocks quality on-demand interpretation at a macro scale never before seen. Today, we're doing over 4,000 monthly sessions, and we're on track to hit 1 million in total by 2025. And our adoption is so broad, giving us this path to sustainability with 220 paid accounts and 5 large NGO contracts. So now we're getting ready for hospitals and government agencies. But the coolest thing is that our early data indicates that Tarjimly is doubling the speed and access of medical support. And I think that hits why this matters so much. At Tarjimly, we're trying to dramatically reduce costs and wait time while improving quality and trust, which will allow for more beneficiaries to be served, as well as increase access to the underserved. It's improving holistic outcomes, plugging into things like employment, legal access, education, and more, allowing for previously underserved communities to get the social services they need and thrive. So finally, I'd like to invite you all to join our mission today in 2 ways. One, you can get every bilingual, multilingual you know to sign up or donate to support our refugee interpreters. And 2, you can connect us to your networks at humanitarian and health systems so we can drive an ecosystem change in global health. Thank you all for the time.
Please welcome Elizabeth McGovern, trustee, Patrick J. McGovern Foundation, and founder and executive director, WEMA International.
Good to see you.
Awesome job. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, MIT Solve, and thank you for that amazing pitch. I'd like to start by briefly introducing myself. Again, my name is Liz McGovern, and I come to you today wearing 3 hats. As the announcer said, also called the voice of God, I've been told, I'm a trustee of the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation. The foundation is a 21st century global philanthropy committed to advancing AI and data science to create a more sustainable, equitable, and thriving world. My second hat is as a physician. I worked 19 years in community health centers here in Massachusetts, and it is because of this work I know firsthand the importance of timely, high quality, and culturally competent translation services. And my third hat is as a social entrepreneur. I am the founder and executive director of WEMA International, an NGO committed to holistic, community-led development work in Ethiopia. So Atif, we first met in the fall. You were one of 4 solver teams that was awarded the Patrick J. McGovern Prize for the AI and Humanity. And I have just been so, you know I'm a huge fan of Tarjimly, really. It is what I think of as the Uber of translations. And it is brilliant, it is innovative, and trust me, as a physician and somebody who works in the humanitarian space, it is desperately needed. So I have a few questions for you. Okay, so how has the AI for Humanity Prize helped your mission so far? And how are you thinking about AI and Tarjimly in the context of this amazing AI wave that we're experiencing?
Yeah, so the AI for Humanity Prize and MIT Solve together have really helped us, scale our impact. I think we've almost tripled our reach in the last 18 months, which is incredible. But especially funding the technology development has been really helpful. I mean, building a consumer-like mobile app is really hard regardless, but I think the secret sauce, the special difference, is this AI matching algorithm, right? A lot of people ask the question, why not machine translation? That's the first thing that kind of comes to mind. And we rather use AI and machine learning to connect people to the right translator at the right time. So when we started, we had a single objective function that the algorithm focused on, which was speed. So get you someone really fast. And now with the support from the prize, we've been able to build that into a multi-objective function. So now we look at speed, quality, cost, translator utilization, and use case fit. So there's about 5 different functions that we look at now. So all that's very difficult to build, but I think the thing that really gets people going is where is all this stuff happening with AI and machine learning. For us, I think there's a couple of challenges with machine translation today. A lot of people think that you could just pull out Google Translate and get what you need. The reality is that just doesn't meet the use case in humanitarian and health settings. It's much more culturally nuanced. It needs a lot more focus. And especially when you deal with an interpreter that's a human, they can tell you, hey, I'm not sure about this interpretation, or I don't know the answer. And that's way more important and more valuable for you than a computer that's going to say with 100% confidence, this is what I think the translation is. And so you get confident from that translation, but it may not be accurate. The other part that I think AI and machine translation is going to help a lot in is, or has challenges today in, is actually the long tail of languages. So you always see demos in German and French and Japanese, but like, what about Arabic? What about Farsi? What about Tigrinya? What about the long tail of economically less powerful languages? There's not the corpus of data online for these LLMs to learn off of from that. So we actually think a really cool thing for Tarjimly long term is we can start building that corpus of data from the translation, from the text, from the audio that people are using for our services. So I think that's why I'm really excited about the long term for AI in translation. I think the really big benefit today is in the actual matching of human translators. There's two routes that it can go long term. Either it's going to be human driven and AI assisted, or it's going to be AI driven and human assisted. And we think it's going to be the former for like at least the next 5 to 10 years in order to get that quality corpus of data in the world that you can actually train and make available and meet the 99.9% quality that you need for humanitarian and health settings. So that's our perspective right now on translation. And the AI wave is incredible, but I think we're figuring out as a team, how do we build the AI translation piece into it? And I think machine translation assistance is what we're going to start building in the near future. So excited for that.
Fantastic. I think I shared with you when I was working as a physician, I worked in the refugee resettlement program, and the interpreter was really part of the team. And we talked a lot about really challenging issues, traumatic events, the challenges of settling into a new life, and having another human there, that human voice, the human component. I'm not sure in this area of really deep human connection and interaction, the role of AI translation versus the human. I'm still really a believer in bringing that human spirit, the human love into translation services. So my second question, we have a big audience here today. Yeah. And I'm sure many people want to know, how would I get involved in social impact organizations such as Tarjimly or like other types of organizations that are supported by MIT Solve? What kind of advice could you give the audience today?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking for ML engineers and anybody who can volunteer or work with us. So if there's anyone in the audience who wants to help with our mission, please do reach out. I think there's obviously this awesome cohort of not just this year, but several years that MIT Solve has created of solutions, social impact organizations, nonprofits, for-profits. Get involved, like spend time, volunteer, reach out, even just as a connector even can be extremely helpful for organizations like us. I would also say that if you want to go strike out on your own and do something new to start, that's really awesome, and I would encourage people to do that. But really be rooted and grounded in your mission as a person. Like really understand why you want to work on this thing. For me, the refugee crisis made a lot of sense. I come from a refugee immigrant family. But the Syrian refugee crisis hit, and then the Rohingya crisis, and then the US border crisis, and it became almost inevitable for me. I was like, I gotta do something about this. And so me and my friends, we would just drop our bags after work. I've been working in big tech companies in Silicon Valley, and we just work on this. And I think like having a long-term passion for something is so important. Like today, the culture is very, I would say, fickle in tech a little bit, right? We go from one project to the next project, year 1 job, year 2 job, year 3 job. We're very quick to move to the next thing. I think in social impact, especially if you can ground yourself in something that really pulls your heart and motivates you to move, I think that is just going to be the game changer for you starting something on your own. And the best way is getting involved with other nonprofits. I worked with 2 or 3 other nonprofits, even while I was an MIT student. I helped different organizations, and I think that is a great way to get started with impact missions. And MIT Solve has been incredible at serving as a connector for all of us, in the nonprofit space especially, but also even in social ventures broadly. I think I've been in 5 or 6 different social impact organizations and accelerators and things like that. And I think something like MIT Solve is really focused on bringing the technology into the equation. And I think that's why, we've been working with McGovern and others. And so I'd really encourage people to leverage this community here. I think I was in the audience in like 2014, 2013, thinking like, wow, it'd be so cool to be up here someday doing this stuff. So like, it's pretty awesome 8 years later that, I can be a speaker all here and share what we've been working on. So yeah, thank you. Thank you to MIT Solve. Really cool thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And you can clearly see the passion, really, and that's driving. I think the passion, the sense of change, possibility, and often this work comes from a place of love. So thank you for what you're doing for vulnerable people around the world. So thank you. So I'd like to close with 2 announcements. My first announcement, I'm delighted to share that the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation will enter in its 6th year in partnership with MIT Solve. And today we are launching the 2023-2024 AI for Humanity Prize. So what will happen is in the fall, there'll be 4 solver teams selected. Those teams that have leveraged AI. Then in the spring, yes, so there's $150,000. It's a $150,000 prize, so in the fall, 4 teams win $25,000. And then in the spring, out of those 4 teams, 1 team is selected for follow-on funding to get $50,000. So that's the total $150,000, which is very exciting. As I said, I have 2 announcements. And so what I would like today to do right now is to announce the winner of the AI for Humanity Prize follow-on funding. And this is actually a surprise, but congratulations.
Now it makes sense. Yeah, that's awesome.
Congratulations. Thank you.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
So I think they're going to take a photo.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Surprise! I promised him no surprises.
I didn't. Now it all makes sense. It's all
He's like, why are we in the opening plenary?
yeah. That's really nice of you. Thank you so much.
Well, no, thank you. It was really, actually, it was the solver community that selected you. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
really
MIT Solve, and thank you, Patrick J. McGovern Foundation. This is awesome.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and all of you enjoy MIT Solve.
And now please welcome Elahe Amadi, co-founder and CEO, Themis AI.
Thank you. When you think of AI, one of the first things that comes to mind is humanoid robots. They're actually very cute. But what's interesting is that the robotic industry is actually quite behind in adopting the most advanced AI technology. So where is this AI that we keep talking about and hearing about it? AI is the automation that decides who is qualified for loans and credits. It's the one auto-screening resumes that ended up denying applicants just because of their names. It's the algorithm used during COVID to prioritize patients and ended up deprioritizing minorities due to historical bias in the training data. AI is everywhere, and most of the time, hidden to the everyday consumers. Then you might ask, why is it that an industry such as robotic is still behind, while we're still seeing a lot of other applications of AI everywhere? A lot of these machine learning algorithms are black boxes made out of billions of parameters, trillions of data that was used for training. And while we have made incredible advances in the AI applications and their capabilities, we still don't know how to avoid the failures of these models, or even how to deploy them responsibly. What's more, we clearly see that existing solutions, such as hard-coding the failures out, banning the technology altogether, or investing a humongous amount of money on manual data cleaning, is just not it. At MIT CSIL, we were passionate about how to fundamentally approach this challenge of building robust and reliable machine learning applications. And after years of research at Professor Daniel Roos's lab, we innovated a technology to automatically detect risks within data sets and models and develop tools to be able to mitigate them. And we applied our technology in different applications, such as facial detection, autonomous vehicles, and healthcare, safety-critical applications. And we were able to build models that outperform existing state-of-the-art solutions, which then led us to founding Themis AI. My name is Elahe Amadi, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Themis AI. At Themis AI, our mission is to empower the world to create, advance, and deploy trustworthy AI. Our technology focuses on 3 main pillars to create trustworthy AI solutions: robustness and reliability, fairness and ethics, and explainability. Today, our first product is available and is open source, and it's called CAPSA. CAPSA is a data and model-agnostic wrapper for risk-aware decision-making. CAPSA takes in existing models, even big and complex models, wraps them, and converts them into risk-aware version of itself. With CAPSA, your model is now capable of calculating its own risk, such as bias, model uncertainty, and data uncertainty for every single output of the model. By this point, you probably have heard a lot about generative AI models. They're everywhere. Everything is built off of it. There is huge hypes everywhere. But one of the challenges with generative models is how can we actually know when the output is reliable and it's a good quality output, and when the model is actually hallucinating and spreading misinformation. So we wrapped one of these models with CAPSA, and we're like, let's see what happens. And yes, we were able to make the first ever risk-aware generative model with CAPSA, where the model is now capable of identifying which words in the prompts are the most challenging for the model, and which pixels and areas in the output are the most unreliable. At Themis AI, we're empowering the world to create, advance, and deploy trustworthy and reliable AI application. Thank you so much.
Please welcome Selena De Sola, co-founder Glasswing International, and Manish Bapna, President and CEO, Natural Resources Defense Council.
I'm actually sitting here. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here, and we're looking forward to having this conversation with Manish. So I think I'm going to start with a question. We're both going to talk a little bit about this, but I wanted to start by asking you, Manish, in your work, how do you meet the most pressing needs, like of the moment, the most urgent needs, while also addressing the root and structural causes, the systemic challenges that we face globally, and particularly with climate?
Great. Thank you, Selena. Great to be here with all of you today. My name is Manish Bapna. I'm the head of the Natural Resources Defense Council, which is a fairly influential environmental organization. I was first sitting in this auditorium in 1987 as an incoming undergrad at MIT. Honestly, changed my major 7 times between when I started. I ended up as an electrical engineer, which is the biggest joke in my family because I'm the last person to touch a computer. But after a very meandering road, ended up at an environmental advocacy organization working on the climate crisis. It is, and it is such a fascinating problem to tackle. It is incredibly complex. And so one of the big challenges is how do you make sure what we're doing is actually moving the needle on something that is so large and complex as climate? And when you take a step back and think about this problem, what is the problem? The problem is really that our current economic system, major key economic systems, are incompatible with the climate, with the environment, with equity. And so we need to reimagine key economic systems. And the way I've been thinking a little bit about this is there's 3 major systems we need to reimagine. The energy system, how we produce, how we generate, how we use energy. The food and land use system, how we grow food, how it intersects with forests, how we use land, and kind of cities and buildings, how we design our cities, how we organize them, how we plan them, how we live in them, how we build them. And if we can get these 3 systems to be consistent with the climate, with the environment, with equity, we will have made huge progress. And this is about where do we need to be in 2050, how we think about not only reducing emissions, but how we think about resilience, how we think about economic development, how we think about equity. And as we think about what we do, are we convinced it takes us a step towards that future that we must see, that better future that we must realize? So maybe just to turn that question back to you.
I have never been on this stage, and I did not go to MIT, so I'm further away from the engineering than probably everybody in this room. I'm Selena. I'm a social entrepreneur as well. I'm from El Salvador. And yeah, I mean, I think for us, I work in Latin America, and we have 8% of the world's population, but 37% of its homicides. So the pressing need, one of the biggest pressing needs that we face is violence and the impacts of violence, trauma, stress, and how that can perpetuate violence and victimization. So in our work, and I think many other organizations as well, the way we're looking at the pressing needs and the balance of that and systems is that we are working deeply and over time in communities, with communities, to identify their priorities through but always through public systems, through public schools, through public health facilities, and really drawing from that and accompanying that work with research, with partners like JPAL or the World Bank and local universities. So basically we go deep for long periods of time, evaluate, and then try to build the case and generate the evidence for strategies that can be brought to policymakers. So it's like really trying to make sure that policy is founded on and based on the priorities of people that actually live in communities and experience, you know, the different challenges directly, whether they're social, economic, or environmental. So I'm going to go to our second question. I mean, these are all huge questions, obviously, but so can you share, Manish, some examples of collaborations in your work that have led to scale, that have led to deployment and adoption of solutions, and any lessons learned that you may have from, you know, your professional experience?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, for the past, when we think a little bit about solutions, we have to think about scale when we talk about the climate crisis. And a part of what I've seen really proliferate, expand in a very good way over the past 10, 15 years are a lot of collaborations involving startups in the private sector, governments, and NGOs, where no single stakeholder or organization can solve a problem, but by coming together, they bring different perspectives, different skills in ways that can create the type of innovation we ultimately need to see. So just to give a couple of examples, from very boring things like how do you measure greenhouse gas emissions in a company? I worked quite actively with the private sector, with government stakeholders, NGOs, about how you design accounting tools to measure greenhouse gas emissions. We worked on something a little bit more kind of shiny and exciting, how to leverage remote sensing, cloud computing, ICT, to be able to monitor forest growth or cutting forests down in real time. How we think about resilience. We worked in India to help cities develop heat action plans. We know that extreme heat is a huge issue all around the world. How do you get cities in low resource settings to actually be able to respond quickly to those types of issues? And then you think about this country, how we worked together in a very, very different way to pass the climate bill, the Inflation Reduction Act. In all of these, and many, many more examples, the only reason these solutions succeeded at scale or went to scale is because of really interesting collaborations. And I think a couple of the lessons, you know, is a real alignment on the overall objective? Are we clear about the distinct contributions different partners in a coalition or platform can actually bring to the table? And perhaps most importantly, share resources, don't fly your own flag. Everyone needs to feel they have a stake and find credit in the joint effort. Gandhi once said there are two types of people, those who do the work and those who take the credit. Try to be in the first group because there's a lot less competition there. It's a good thing to remember as you engage in these collaborations.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think I'm going to echo a lot of what you said. I think that work across sectors, and one of the big challenges in working with government is obviously that there's a finite, depending on the context, but there's a finite number of years you have to work with government. It's complex. You may be aligned or not in the way the government, is governing, is ruling the country. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And I think what you said is getting aligned and remembering that we're responding to the priorities of the population and ultimately of the planet. So I think in our case, we just started, we're always looking to scale by working with government, like I said earlier, generating evidence. But we just launched an initiative in partnership and with support from the Audacious Project at TED, which is called Sanamente. And we're working to train over 100,000 frontline workers within government, so ministries of education, health, law enforcement, child protection. And we're training these people who are already serving on the front lines on trauma and also self-care, so they can better care for themselves and therefore integrate a trauma lens in the service they're providing to the communities they serve. So we're really strong believers in strengthening systems and remembering that people that make up those systems are also citizens or regular people. So we typically are aligned in what we want at the end, even if we're not on the same side of a political spectrum or different in other ways. So it's like, how do you generate the demand, the institutional demand for something that evidence shows is necessary, and then also get out of the way, like you said, and you mentioned the Gandhi quote. I think sometimes that's hard for organizations. Like, if you've been successful, you probably won't be mentioned, right? And particularly in scaling with government. Like, if it's their idea, even though you brought it forward, then that's probably the best way to do it, because it'll outlive, It'll outlive the government terms or the timeline that they're there. And I think, the climate crisis is so big, and and you mentioned all these sectors, and it does require all of us to be so involved at the individual systems, institutional level. And, climate crisis is a major focus for NRDC. And there have been some big wins recently, like the passing of the climate bill last summer, which is a huge deal. And then I'd like to know, and I think we'd all like to know, what are your next big priorities that you want to, building on that success? What's next?
Yeah, no, one cannot overstate the significance of the climate bill that was passed last summer, at least for the United States, in terms of actually meeting our own climate goals. The climate goal that the President Biden put out a couple years ago need to reduce emissions by 50 to 52% by below 2005 levels by 2030. This climate bill gets the United States halfway there, but not all of the way there. So there's three things we need to see in the next 18 months. The first is we got to actually both defend and implement this climate bill. Right now, as we speak, in the debt ceiling negotiations that are taking place in Washington, there's an effort to try to gut key elements of the climate bill. And there has to be both a need to protect that, but also then a need to implement the climate bill, to make sure that the promises contained in that bill on the power sector, transportation, industry, agriculture, those things actually happen on the ground. The second thing that needs to happen is the government, the administration in Washington, the Biden administration, has powers to set standards and rules to actually help accelerate the transition. So if you think of the climate bill as primarily money and a set of carrots, there's some sticks that the administration can use to also accelerate the transition. So how it does that on power plants, on cars, on trucks, on appliances is absolutely critical. A couple weeks ago, they put forward rules on cars and trucks. In the next week, they're going to put forward rules on power plants. Those rules are proposed rules. They need to be finalized in a timely manner. And the third thing we need to see is states. Incredible opportunity for states to take more ambitious action. What we see oftentimes in the climate space is you have leadership states that are able to push the envelope of where we need to go, and that creates space for the federal government to follow. So what California does, what Massachusetts does, what New York does, matters. because it helps set the frontier of what actually is possible. And, you know, Selena, this conference is about unlocking collective potential. How does that play out in the work that you're doing with youth mental health in Latin America?
Yeah, I mean, you were just talking about...
We'll assume that's for both of us, but...
Thank you. Yeah, we will assume it's for both of us. So I think you were talking about, you know, taking action at the national level, at the state level. And I feel like collective action is about, if you're going to unlock collective action, the only way to do that is by unlocking individual action, right? So it's like unlocking individual human potential. So we work with young people who face a lot of adversity. And I think, you know, one thing we've seen is that we need to create the conditions, and this obviously comes up a lot in conversations around immigration and other issues. But if we can create the conditions, the safe spaces, the conditions, the opportunities to learn for young people to thrive and get engaged, and even from a mental health standpoint, to be able to use that mental space and energy and feel like you can have an impact on your life and your environment, because it's hard to feel like you can impact the environment if you feel like you can't control your life on the way to school, right? Or that your life is at risk. So I think for us, it's like we've seen how young people then take action and become volunteers and get involved, but they need to feel safe and they need to have access to skill building and opportunity. So for us, I think we need to work on that. We need to work on individuals in order to be able to unlock the collective space. And we've seen that young people who go through these processes, then when they do become engaged, they really catalyze a lot more. They're better at movement building. They're better at leadership. I mean, we've hired 60 of our former students. So I'm hoping eventually they run, you know, the organization, or they get involved in local politics or national politics. But I think it's working at those different levels, like you said, I think is key. So I think we need, and we're talking about like what levels we're working on, and I think we need to address climate with every tool we've got. I think now more than ever, the world is in absolute acute crisis in terms of climate. And I'm curious to know what the interplay is, or what you see as the interplay between policy work and tech innovation, especially at this conference where that's so relevant.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So most of the work that I do is on policy. I suspect most of the work that Solve and many of you do is on innovation. And the point is this is, as we all know, just so inextricably linked. So much of the solutions that we've seen come to scale have been because when you get that policy innovation kind of interlink working effectively, it allows us to go so much faster. Just a couple of quick thoughts on that. Policy can be good or it could be bad. So how we design policy to reflect this type of societal goods we want to see is incredibly important. I remember about 10 years ago when policy was being designed in ways that would support ethanol as a biofuel. That was a mistake. So there's a lot of examples of both good and bad. I think a couple of other kind of important things as we think about policy and innovation, a lot of the attention tends to get focused on the new shiny breakthrough technologies. And that's important. But I also want to keep kind of a focus on the kind of near-term incremental improvements we need in solar, in wind, in transmission. These small improvements of existing technologies are what we need in the next 10, 15 years to actually begin to move the needle. The other piece around looking at policy and innovation, we get a lot of thought on policy about how to support kind of R&D for mitigation in the developed world. And I just want people to think hard about also the interplay between policy and how we build solutions that improve resilience and that work in the developing world. We have all the R&D to help kind of major cash crops in this country. How much R&D is there to support heat or drought resistance for orphan crops in Africa? How we get those things right and the balance of effort right is absolutely critical. Speaking of resilience, we were chatting a few days ago about resilience and wanted to ask a few questions a little bit about the intersection of climate and mental health, is just an important space to also be exploring.
Yeah, and I feel like, and we're going to close up soon, so I feel like this will be kind of a summary, at least for me, and then I'm going to ask you to do the same. But I think if you think about climate and the complexity and the climate crisis, there's also like what a colleague of mine calls a social climate crisis, right? So you can't, if you're unwell, you also cannot be an active participant or fully active in working on climate issues. So that intersection of climate and mental health and resilience, individual resilience in order to achieve climate resilience, I think is key. And I think is something that we can achieve, again, working at the community level, working at the systems and with institutions. So it is so urgent, but when your mind is focused on surviving, we were talking about this even earlier today, like feeding your family, health crisis, you know, the climate crisis that we talk about and we're talking about now is experienced through a hurricane, an earthquake, your crops failing. So if you're thinking about those urgent things up front, it's hard to step back and think about it. And I think I'll just finish as kind of my last thought is, as we address all these complex issues, how do we remember to ask people what it is their priorities are? Like, how do we ask, not just institutionally so we can be aligned, like, if you ask someone what they want to achieve, right, their priorities, it's easier then to align with someone. And sometimes it's easy to forget that simple step, like just ask and keep asking. And I think that all these issues remind me, and when you're talking about the macro climate issues too, that we just need to keep asking in order to come together around something and stop battling around it, right? So I'm curious to know what your final words are as we go into the last minute or so of our session.
So just to maybe build a little bit on one of the things you said, as we think a little bit about where we need to see more innovation, I'm just so delighted a lot of focus on resilience is taking place, a lot of focus on the developing world is taking place, and as we do that, a couple of the things just to keep in mind that we see as necessary ingredients in the ecosystem to go to scale are the institutions in these contexts capable of scaling solutions? And is there adequate finance at the right terms to scale those solutions in many of these contexts? So looking at the institutional and financial dimensions and the role that you can play to help make sure that those are in place are incredibly important. The last thing I might say is I had an opportunity to speak about climate in one of the most intimidating places ever. It was my daughter's high school class. And you could imagine my daughter coming to me and saying, if there's one thing I beg you to do, please don't embarrass me. And so here I am talking to this 15-year-olds about climate, and I was struck by how deep they understood the content, and yet how to some extent they felt somewhat unclear about how to tackle it because it felt overwhelming. It felt so scary, so complex. And it just reminded me of something that my mother once told me a very long time ago. She told me that, pessimists are right more often, but optimists win more often. And it is such a true quote about what we need right now with this incredibly existential crisis. So it is so great to be in a room with so much optimism and innovation. So thank you for having us today. Thank you.
Right on the dot, this way.
Please welcome Norhan Bayomi, co-lead MIT Climate Machine.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you all today. So, as the legendary musician Bob Marley once said, one good thing about music, once it hits you, you feel no pain. So, music is actually a powerful tool. Every one of us has a favorite track that reminds me of a memory or have an emotion that's sadness or happiness or even hopeful. It is these power of melodies that can inspire us. So the power of music is undeniable. And what we were trying to do here today with the Climate Machine is utilizing this power of music to get masses behind the idea of climate action. It is something that's truly unique. It can unite us all. As a universal language, music has the power to link bridges between different cultures, races, and gender. So in the Climate Machine, we're trying to ask the question, how can we leverage the power of music and art using technologies to get people engaged in climate action? We had so many questions that we had to ask first. First one, how can we actually talk to people about climate without really making them feel bad that they're not doing anything to the planet? Especially, it was more challenging working in a music festival setup. So in a music festival, imagine seeing an MIT professor talking to 2,000 people who left the main stage with 2 big artists performing just to listen to climate. So this is something that we got to witness last year through the Climate Machine. What you see here on the screen, these cute avatars, are called the climates. So climate, very smart. And these climates, we developed it to link as a digital twin. In the age of social media, Instagram, Facebook, all these platforms, you need something that you can share with other people. And we want the climate to look cool somehow. So with the climates, you actually get the identity of what type of climate knowledge that you're mostly interested in. And as a result, that could give you recommendations on what are the actions that are suitable to your interest. We were privileged to work with a music community called Anjuna Family through our collaboration with an electronic music label called Anjuna Beats and Anjuna Deep. So these people you see on the screen are people in actual music festival who took the decision to leave the music venue and learn about climate. We ran this quiz over 5 music festivals last year with 1,000 participants, creating these climate communities, people who are interested and excited about solving climate problems. Speaking about communities, we wanted to leverage the collective power of these communities in understanding climate perception in the public. So we asked the question, how can we understand the future of climate from the public perception without asking questionnaires, doing interviews? So we use AI art generator. So these images you see here are images created by actual people in a workshop setup with 60 participants. And as you might expect, you can get some dark vision of the future, but also some people were really optimistic. We asked them to tell us how they can actually see the future of climate, whether it's in the near future, the far future. What's more interesting to us that you can see that some of these images are really optimistic in the near future. And these were the kind of people that we really want to work with. They can become the climate ambassador who can push the collective actions toward climate. Also, we're using AI art to give some idea and awareness about the impacts of climate on indigenous groups. This video is created by our group with an original music composition on the impacts of climate on indigenous groups in Africa. We're also working with a native tribe here in the US, reflecting their impact on climate through their relationship with culture and identity. They have a very unique relationship with nature, and we wanted to capture this in a unique way, giving them voice through the use of music and art. We're also working on a very large scale. 2 weeks ago, we ran this experience here at MIT, projecting on the building behind me, the new music building, basically giving MIT an electronic dance party, but it was actually telling them about sharing their vision of the climate. These footages you see is actually from the live performance we had behind Chris Gee. We had around 100 people coming on and off and asking, like, what is this? What are you guys trying to do here? Is this like a rave party? So actually, people were really interested to know that we used that as a climate canvas to get people to know about issues about biodiversity and climate action. And we want to do more of this, also in a music festival, not just within MIT. So this is not just a one-person effort. There is a big team behind this who are really passionate about going forward to push climate action. I mean, they're really lucky. They go to a music festival for doing research. And above all, the great mind who's driving this group, Professor John Fernandez, who's actually the main reason why we're doing this work. When I went to him 2 years ago saying, like, I have this crazy idea to work with music labels, he went for it. And this is actually why we're doing this work today. Finally, I want to conclude with this person that we met through a music festival, Jackie. She is a second-grade teacher by day. By night, she calls herself the rave mama. She has been going to music festival for over 20 years. And she got inspired by all the work we're doing in Climate Machine. And now she's sharing this message with her students. She always tells us now, you gotta teach them young. And yes, this is what we need to do. We need more people like Jackie who can become ambassadors for climate action and can inspire their students to work for the better of the planet. Thank you so much.
And now, please welcome back to the stage Executive Director of MIT Solve, Hala Hanna.
You're still here. Do you want your Star Wars joke, right? Okay, what do you call a Solve community coming together on May the 4th? May the 4th be with you. Okay, it was actually written by ChatGPT. But what a great time we had. I'm sorry, it's disappointing. It's so bad, it's good. We've heard together from Adrienne, who's a living example of what technology can do at the service of human needs, of Atif and Liz, who showed us how right specs can lead to right outcomes. On climate, we learned from Selina and Manish lessons on pursuing collective action for climate, and you just saw with Norhan what visualization and music can do to push us to action too. And we heard from Elahe about generative AI, and I think all of this highlights how exponentially our world is changing. Our institutions, our societies, our intuitions don't actually naturally match that rate of speed. And this mismatch can be at the heart of a lot of pain. And we can't fool ourselves that technology is neutral. Tech is as neutral as we are, as shaped by the values and assumptions and aspirations that we bring to it as it is bound by the science. But I'm not a technologist, so let me share someone else's words with you. This is by Audrey Tang. When we see Internet of Things, let's make it Internet of Beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it collaborative learning. When we see user experience, let's make it about the human experience. And when we hear that singularity is near, let us remember that plurality is here. And this, for me, is the North Star of the world we want to create. I almost said Death Star, but... And at Solve, JEDI actually stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So it's very much on brand. If you've joined us for this public plenary, thank you so much. I hope you're inspired and that you stay engaged with us. There are so many ways to do so. You can use the QR code. And one of the ways is by applying to our 2023 global challenges before May 5th. There is over $1 million in available funding for the incoming cohort. So if you're solving for financial inclusion, health in fragile contexts, learning for civic action, climate adaptation, or if you're an innovator supporting Indigenous people in the US or Canada, please apply. The funding is thanks to the generosity of our prize funders, and you can be a supporter too. There's always time to add more prize funding, and we're very close to the 1.5 million mark, so maybe you'll get us over the edge. So if you're part of the Solve community and you're attending the coming 2 days, this was just the beginning. Now we're heading over to Sandburg for our first set of brain trusts for the 2022 Solver class. These sessions are a true embodiment of what we do. We center the work around our innovators, we come together as a community around their solution, and we are givers. Now, we saw how art is such a powerful connector. And so to close us, I'd like to welcome again to stage multidisciplinary artist Speedy Wolf. She's been referred to as a musical weirdo by Vice, and I think she's wonderful in so many ways. I hope you are inspired by her. Enjoy, and may the force be with you.
Thank you very much, Hala, and it's wonderful to be here and to close this with you guys. I opened it up there. And this is my first Solve experience. I've never been here before. I'm an independent artist. And today I'm going to be sharing a visualization of 800,000 years of atmospheric CO2 data, which was shown to me by a NASA engineer, and telling you the story of how that started as a song and ended up as an installation and projection with the UN, Nobel Prize Summit, COP26, New York Times Climate Hub, and other climate spaces. So I am an artist. I tend to work very much across the disciplines. You know, anything from a music dementia research project working with neuroscientists through to a space broadcast using the Holmdel horn antenna and working with Dr. Robert Wilson, Nobel laureate. So the work is definitely not in one box or in one lane. And I never really understood that as a kid, that you had to pick something and then just stick with it. You know, through the education process, I was like, well, we're so much more multidimensional than we often think, and our brains are so much more able to run simultaneous things and not just focus on one thing. And I also feel that working between these fields actually helps to create bridges and bring people together and kind of cross-pollinate ideas in really amazing ways. So it's a short timer today, so 8 minutes. I'm going to tell you a bit about this project. This is one of the latest installations. And it began with me going to the cinema as a teenager in London with my best friend and watching An Inconvenient Truth. And like so many probably at the time saw it, I was horrified. You know, being also pretty young, I had no idea what I was watching, or I didn't know what the film was about, and it felt like it was some sort of spoof, you know, Hollywood disaster movie rather than a documentary with real, you know, facts and data as a portrait of where we are or where we were on the planet at that point in time. So I left the cinema just so angry, and I went home and I wrote a song called From Green to Red about what I'd seen, very much, you know, an environmental song. But then I thought, well, I never have to record this song because everyone's going to see this documentary. It will be on a completely different path in 5 or 10 years. And of course, that didn't happen. So that track ended up becoming part of the second record, which included a reimagining of the album jacket cut by the tailor who dressed Bowie, Hendrix, Jagger out of fabric, which was woven with my music, which was recorded in the room where McCartney wrote Eleanor Rigby and Hendrix wrote The Wind Cries Mary. So yeah, the projects are all pretty layered and different. So doing these sorts of projects, you know, I ended up being at Bell Labs and working on something actually totally different. For those of you who don't know Bell Labs, I'm sure all of you know Bell Labs, but the transistor, the telephone, you know, incredibly brilliant engineers. And I ended up going into the world's quietest room, the anechoic chamber that they have there. And this was such a profound experience in terms of just feeling this silence that actually is meant to drive you mad. A lot of the engineers can't typically stay in there longer than 20 minutes, but I found it so peaceful. And it was like this ultimate reset. And I realized we have so much noise around us all the time, and not literal audio noise, but information noise. And so vital planet-saving messages, notifications, social media, music, journalism, everything is competing, everything is sitting in this same superficial sphere, and it's hitting us, and it's bombarding us. So just going into that chamber profoundly affected me. And it was through working with Bell Labs that I ended up meeting Dr. Robert Wilson, who used this incredible instrument, the Holmdel horn antenna, to pick up cosmic microwave radiation and prove the validity of the Big Bang Theory, which won him a Nobel Prize. And he had wanted to meet me. I'd wanted to meet him. So we ended up meeting in front of this horn antenna, which you can see. And I said, look, you've used this to receive, but have you ever used it to transmit? He's like, well, no. I'm like, well, I happen to have this, record installation, anti-stream with Bell Labs called Raw Space. Maybe we could send it into space using this horn antenna. And he's like, no, because the sound waves will get to a point in the Earth's atmosphere and then they'll stop. And I thought that was the end of the conversation, and he goes away and I go away. And then I get an email from him a month later saying, BT, I figured it out. We can do an update on the horn, and we can send the record into space if you still want to do it. I don't know many people that would be like, no, I'm not interested anymore. So yeah, I meet him, and there are just a couple of us, and we do this very whimsical, incredibly joyful, fun experiment. And again, something like that, at the time, it felt so small and so intimate, but it's been something that's really resonated with people, bigger than it felt in the moment. So through that, directly, indirectly, I'm really condensing a lot of story just to get to the point, but I end up at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratories, and they've asked if I'll give a talk to all their engineers about my work. So I'm giving a conversation, a lot of brilliant minds. And at the end of this presentation, one of the chief engineers, Dr. Randy Wesson, comes up and shows me these atmospheric CO2 graphs dating back 800,000 years. He's like, look, I really feel you'll get something from seeing this. I've seen your work. Maybe there's something you'll be inspired by. And I'm looking at these graphs that are on a time scale that human beings just can't fathom or operate on, particularly today with everything becoming more instant gratification, short-termist, like now, or 5 years or 10 years. But no, not 1,000 years, not these timelines that the planet has been operating on well before we arrived. So I thought, okay, this data is so effing shocking, and it's like being back in the cinema watching An Inconvenient Truth, yet it's 15 years later and we've progressed nothing. If anything, we've exacerbated this emergency. And realizing that that data is so cold for so many people, I wanted to find a way of translating it, revisualizing it into something everyone could see and absorb, setting it to the song that I wrote as a teenager. And so now we're going to just take a little look. It's just the trailer. This installation, this project is actually going to be installed in the Media Lab in its interactive version. But this is just the trailer we're going to take a quick look at.
Outside, the people like cars are still running. When inside, it's safe to deny that it's coming. The TV's turned up, so the winds are just humming to the sound of the heat rising. We don't want to hear that the problem is us, so we live like we want in our own universe. 'Cause man thinks he's God in a devilish way. We're too proud to see what we won't even say. We don't want to know, don't want to know, don't want to know, don't want to know. No, we don't want to know, don't want to know, don't want to know, don't want to know. So take my hand, babe, and I'll walk you to school, where you'll learn how to live by a new set of rules. 'Cause we played all our cards, but none left for you. Forgive us, my dear, can't you see? It's the truth that we don't want to know, don't want to know, don't want to know, don't want to know. No, we don't want to know, don't want to know, don't want to know, don't want to know. What happened to love? Is it out of date? Turn back, there's so much here to say. What happened to
So as you can see, that is the 800,000 years of atmospheric CO2 data, rising carbon levels. And I reckon you guys are all smart enough to figure out where human beings really started fucking things up. So this is just the trailer, the installation where you can actually move your hands over the digital projection, pull out the carbon ppm, planetary timeline data and date. Will be in the Media Lab from tomorrow. And having had the most perfect launch for this project, with all these festivals and awards or whatever, not that I care about any of that stuff, COVID happened. So it's 2020. And I thought, okay, well, maybe it doesn't get shown anywhere, and we all stay here in our homes, and no one travels, and somehow the planet heals. Yes, very just optimistic and naive condensation. And then I got an email, and it was the Nobel Prize organization. They said, look, we'd love you to show this project and talk and perform after Sir David Attenborough and Al Gore. Would you be interested? A bit like the space broadcast, you're not going to say no to that. So I ended up showing this project at the inaugural Nobel Prize Summit. And then COP26 projected it 550 feet across onto the conference center. It was then at the New York Times Climate Hub, London Design Biennale, where you could, again, move your hands over and engage the data. And so it's just had this wonderful impact and continues to be having an impact. So as much as it is about the awareness pieces, and as an artist, I feel a responsibility to use whatever tools I can to communicate things that maybe aren't as easily communicated in other fields, or those expert people don't necessarily have the best communication methods. It's the wonderful thing about art. It's kind of this rogue connector that can build these different bridges. I also feel it's about really being part of the tangible solutions. So I've been working with Microsoft Research on environmental data storage in glass that can be preserved for 10,000 years in this very cold, inert, highly efficient manner. And also working with Brian Eno and Michael Stipe to release the world's first bioplastic record, moving away from the typical PVC materials, which of course are hugely problematic. So that is a bit about me, and thank you all. It's been wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to all the brilliant ideas and innovation and partnerships that can come from the next couple of days. Thanks.
On my heart, there's a sickness in this world, keeps on spreading through this land and sea. Though I know there is something in this world we must be learning. It's almost killing me. Just hold your heart, my darling. Hold your heart, my darling. Hold your heart, my darling, now. Know my heart, there's a hatred in this world that keeps on growing. Through the lies we speak, no, I know the truth has never been so disturbing. It's almost killing me. Just hold your heart, my darling. Hold your heart, my darling. Hold your heart, my darling, now. ragged world.